Welcome everyone to the remote commission meeting of the Port of Olympia for August 23rd, 2021. The Port of Olympia is working diligently to address the threat posed by COVID-19 to Thurston County, the state of Washington, and the United States. On March 16, 2020, the commission adopted resolution 2020-03, authorizing certain emergency powers in light of the COVID-19 outbreak, including invoking applicable emergency exemptions to meeting notice requirements and location restrictions of the Open Public Meetings Act. Pursuant to that resolution, the Port of Olympia Commission is conducting tonight's meeting remotely. The Port is following the guidance from Thurston County Health Department to take all efforts to prevent the spread of this virus and is acting in the interest of the safety and welfare of the public, the community, and our employees to limit its spread. Commissioner Zita, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight?
I'll pass, thank you.
All right. Felicia, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight?
Yes, Commissioner Downing, I would love to. Okay, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Felicia.
You're welcome.
The first order of business is the approval of the agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda tonight?
I move that the action item on the Panattoni agreement be moved to advisory. Commissioners seem to agree at our meeting last Thursday that our discussion was incomplete and we did not provide the public with their promised opportunity for comment.
So thank you, Commissioner Zita, for that. We had two different presentations regarding
a motion has been made.
But I'm asking for clarification of your motion. There's the Panattoni discussion.
I move that the action calendar item be moved to advisory.
Okay, it's been moved to move the new market development agreement, interlocal agreement with City of Tumwater to advisory. I'll second for purposes of discussion. My discussion on that item is that staff has informed me that more work needs to happen on that. And so as soon as we vote on Commissioner Zita's motion, I would prefer to table this item entirely. So that's my discussion.
It sounds like you're making an amendment to my motion. Let's hear from Commissioner McGregor.
Commissioner McGregor, I think you're muted.
Okay, is that better?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, I will not vote for the amendment at this point. I do have some other things I'd like to add and move around on this agenda, and that is one of them. So anyway, I'm prepared to vote.
Thank you, Commissioner McGregor and Zita. Commissioner Zita, yeah, I believe I misspoke. I think that, I'm making a friendly amendment to your amendment, which is to table action calendar item 1, new market development agreement, interlocal agreement with City of Tumwater. And that's my friendly amendment, to table it. So you can either accept that friendly amendment or we'll vote on your amendment.
I would be willing to accept your friendly amendment if the public will still have the opportunity to comment on this. The public was denied their opportunity to comment on this at our Thursday meeting. It was an advisory item. They did not get their advisory comment period because the meeting was terminated early. So if the public still gets their comment period on this, I will accept your friendly amendment.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeta. I'm not offering my friendly amendment with further conditions. So therefore, what we have on the table is Commissioner Zeta's amendment, which has been moved and seconded to move the new market development agreement, interlocal agreement with the City of Tumwater from action calendar to advisory. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Nay. Amendment fails. I'd like to make an amendment to table the action calendar item, new market development agreement, interlocal agreement with City of Tumwater. And under the rationale that court staff needs more time to fine tune this amendment. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
So it's been moved and seconded to table from tonight's meeting, the action calendar item, new market development agreement, interlocal agreement with City of Tumwater. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that item is tabled. I have another amendment I'd like to offer, which is to create an advisory item for Felicia's presentation that we ran out of time for at the last meeting. It's entitled New Market Development Agreement, Interlocal Agreement, Considerations, and an Approval Process. I'd like to offer that as an addition to our agenda under advisory item 2.
I'll second
Is there a
that.
second?
I'll second that.
Will you repeat that, please?
So I'm making amendment to, yes, Commissioner Zeta, I'm making an amendment to add to this tonight's agenda advisory item 2, which is Felicia's item that we did not have time to get to at last Thursday's meeting, entitled New Market Development Agreement, Interlocal Agreement, Considerations, and Approval Process. So it's been moved and seconded.
Discussion. Call for discussion.
Or-
Um,
Commissioner Zeta.
I think it would be more appropriate to hear that when we have an improved draft. I understand the staff is working to improve the draft. So I think it's premature to hear that related presentation today.
Thank you. Any other discussion, please?
No, I would
All
like
those
to
in-
hear what she has to, that Felicia has prepared and have it presented so that we can hear it and make comment on it. Thank you.
All those in favor of adding advisory calendar item 2, New Market Development Agreement, Interlocal Agreement, Consideration, Approval Process, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
So that is added. So are there any other amendments to tonight's agenda, please?
No, you covered everything that I had. The only comment I wanted to make has to do under bills and vouchers, but I guess I can make that comment at that point in time, so.
Well, I'd like to remind Commissioner McGregor that bills and vouchers under the consent calendar is a yay or nay vote. And if you want discussion, perhaps you should move bills and vouchers to the, would you like to move that we consider the consent calendar item separately?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. So we have an amended agenda. The agenda with the tabling of action calendar item 1, New Market Development Agreement, Interlocal Agreement with City of Tumwater, and with the addition of advisory calendar item 2, New Market Development Agreement, Interlocal Agreement Considerations and Approval Process. All those in favor of the amended agenda for tonight's meeting, please say aye.
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 Thank you, commissioners. We have an agenda. Next, we move to I'd like to say one thing at the start of the meeting, which relating to the agenda, which is if public comment goes over 30 minutes, we'll add public comment at the end of the meeting per our usual custom. I see we have half a dozen people signed up already for public comment. And also that, because we've got 3 controversial topics perhaps on the agenda, each topic I'd like to have a round robin with questions, followed by a round robin with comment. Thank you, commissioners, for abiding by that. So with that, I'd like
Thanks
to
for
turn
letting
to
us know
the
in advance,
executive
Commissioner Downing. Thanks for letting us
welcome.
know in advance instead of springing on us in the middle of presentation.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Sam.
Okay. Get on the next slide, please. I need to adjust my screen. Okay, the port hosted a successful Movies at the Marina series. 3 events took place at the port's North Point. Live music, local food trucks, shaved ice for kids of all ages, Bat Door from Bronson Coffee, a beer garden supporting local charities, and of course, the outdoor movie, all with the beautiful backdrop of the Salish Sea. Thank you so much to the staff who helped put these events together, and we look forward to more next summer. Next slide. Thurston County Public Health had a mobile vaccination clinic at our August 14th Movies at the Marina event. Public Health administered the Pfizer vaccine to anyone 12 years and up. Walk-ups were welcome. We thank them for them showing up and providing this community service. Thank you. Next slide. Olympia Fire Department conducted training on the port's marine terminal in late July. They covered basic operation awareness and vessel response. Next slide. The Port of Olympia's Summer Seaport newsletter was distributed in early August. You can find a copy on the Port Seaport webpage. Next slide. The Olympia Brewfest was held on Saturday, August 7th on the Port of Olympia's Port Plaza. Even though this year's attendance was reduced due to COVID, the event was still a huge success. The Port is proud to partner with the Thurston County Chamber to help to support the Small Business Incubator Program. Next slide. On August 5th, the City of Tumwater and the Port of Olympia hosted a community workshop on the new market development agreement. We would like to thank the City of Tumwater and their staff for their partnership in helping to host this workshop. Next slide. On Friday, August 6th, Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland came to visit the port staff. Members of the port leadership met with her to discuss upcoming priorities. We thank the Congresswoman for taking time to meet with us and look forward to a strong relationship with her. Next slide. The Marine Terminal had its annual Coast Guard inspection on August 12th. The port passed without any violation. The Coast Guard was highly complimentary on the thoroughness of the paperwork provided and the upkeep of our processes, which is due to the leadership provided by the port's facility security officer, Dan Musser. I'd like to recognize the thorough and consistent work of our security team, Dan Musser, a facility security officer, Len Fosher as assistant facility security officer, and Conley Booth with her additional support and oversight, as well as security supervisor Ryan Quinata from Allied Security and other guards that work with him. This truly is a team effort. Next slide. Unfortunately, it has been and is wildfire season, and we are grateful to have the Washington State Department of Natural Resources Wildfire Division operate out of the Olympia Regional Airport. Planes and helicopters are being used to fight wildfires in the state, and they are using the Olympia Regional Airport as a place to refuel and tend to required maintenance. Thank you for all you do to keep our state safe. Next slide. The Port of Olympia is currently looking for a contract and grant administrator. Applicants can find more information and apply on the port's website at portolympia.com. Applications are due by 11:59 p.m. on August 29th. Next slide. Under the directive of the Thurston County Health Officer and the Washington State Secretary of Health, face masks are required in all port offices. This is a requirement for vaccinated and unvaccinated people alike. Thank you for your cooperation as you enter our places of business. Next slide. On August 11th, 18 members of the Port of Olympia staff attended an oil spill training and drill with Washington State Department of Ecology. The training covered spill response, spill planning, and hazardous material handling. Peregrine, a spill response company based in Everett, brought an oil spill response vessel and conducted oil skimming drills. Thank you to the Department of Ecology for this important training. Next slide. We are seeking feedback via a survey at our Swantown Marine Refueling Station to constantly improve and provide our customers with the best possible service. The survey closes on September 10th at 11:59 p.m. We appreciate your feedback. You can find the survey link at swantownmarina.com. Next slide. The South Sound Maritime Heritage Association Board of Directors announced that Olympia Harbor Days Light, a scaled down version of this popular 48-year-old tugboat festival, will now be offered as a one-day only event on Saturday, September 4th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Port of Olympia's Port Plaza. This event will also include companion online safe at home activities on their website running from August 28th through September 6th. And last but not least, as always, we have several ways for the public to engage with us. Here are some easy ways to contact us, give us feedback, or request a conversation. That's it.
Thank you, Sam. Especially like the movies at the events, and especially the fact that you had a mobile COVID vaccination facility right there. That was pretty cool. Next, we move to a litigation report of Alicia, our own Alicia Brown.
Yes, this evening I do not have a litigation report or update for the commission.
Thank you, Alicia. Next, we move to public comment and commission response. And I have in front of me a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people. I'll just run down the list, and so you'll be ready. Lynn Fitzhugh, Sue Danver, Barbara Carey, Dennis Langens, Wayne Olson, Helen Wheatley, and John Van Enwick. I said that right. So without further ado, Lynn Fitzhugh, are you available to give public comment?
I do not see Lynn signed in unless Lynn is under a different name.
Okay, great. I think we'll circle back to Lynn. And we'll go with Sue Danver. Sue Danver on, ready to give public comment.
Good evening.
Hi, Sue.
Hi. It's just a comment on the number of jobs projected with interlocal agreement future. And I went back and listened to a Frontline show on artificial intelligence. And in that, they were looking at forecasts of lost jobs in the future. And they think that 50% of all jobs will be lost in 15 years. So at one point you had a projection, I don't have it in front of me, 1,500 to 2,600 jobs with the proposal. And I wonder if that is really a fair projection. automation is huge in warehouses, just huge. And there's a lot of documentation for that. And also, there's a projection of lost trucking jobs. That's at one point they were saying it would be active in 2021. They have run into some complications, but over the years, we're going to be seeing a lot of automated trucks. So I guess I just question your ability to project such a number of jobs. And so I think that deserves some review and consideration, because with this development, you're going to put impervious surface over our airport area, and stormwater is then injected into our aquifer, our drinking water. And it's questionable how healthy that will be for our drinking water. And I'm beginning to think the citizens of Thurston County would prefer to have good drinking water than jobs that will be lost in the future. We would like to have open space and trails rather than huge warehouses, which the sole purpose is for profit, not our future. Open space, clean water. So I would like you to incorporate these thoughts into your decision to accept this agreement. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Danver. Our next person signed up for public comment is Barbara Carey. Barbara. Not seeing Barbara Carey.
Yes, she's on.
She's on.
Can you hear
Oh,
me?
there she is. Okay. Thanks, Barb. How you doing?
Good.
Good to
thanks.
hear you.
Hello, I'm a retired hydrogeologist with the state of Washington. And the proposed development agreement with an international developer, Panattoni, will impact the entire community for many generations. That's my concern. I'm not convinced that the Panattoni agreement is the best plan for the community. There are other options for a wooded, vegetated tract that already provides numerous environmental community benefits, such as absorbing carbon, a major remedy for runaway greenhouse gas emissions, allowing groundwater recharge that keeps downstream salmon-bearing streams and rivers from deterioration and keeps underlying aquifers clean and replenished, and prevents flooding of downstream residential areas. Development of warehouses that cover so much of the site with impervious surface will remove mature trees and shrubs that provide important ecosystem services, and it will require sophisticated stormwater treatment to rectify the damage from development. I'd like to know before an agreement is finalized how the large volume of stormwater generated by the outlined development will be treated on site. The shallow depth to groundwater and underlying till layer make it difficult, if at all possible, to treat the stormwater on site using conventional technology. Underground injection wells, if they are being considered, would pose a serious threat to the underlying drinking water aquifer and the water supply well near Bush Middle School. Increased truck traffic, air quality health impacts from increased diesel exhaust, uncertainty that global entities will stay and provide even medium-paying jobs and associated tax revenue. All these and other likely negative consequences of entering into the long-term Panattoni agreement beg the question to me, what about other options for the land? Options with more direct benefits for the community? What about using the forested areas for education of our children? Enhancing areas as forest or vegetable gardens that attract visitors, especially in the high water table areas. This preserves valuable ecosystem services while serving as a place for urban kids to learn and experiment with plants, similar to Grub that's been so successful in Olympia's west side, or facilitating development of smaller local businesses. For our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, we need to use our precious resources carefully and creatively. extensive impervious surfaces overlying a high water table and underlying till layer is a recipe for eventual problems, if not disasters. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carey. Our next speaker signed up is Mr. Dennis Langens.
Can you hear me now?
Hi, Dennis.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
My public comment has to do with financial reporting. I sent the commissioners an email expressing my concern about the deletion of the loss before tax levy measure. That's been a traditional part of the financial reporting, but I noticed that it was knocked out of this year and then it was scrubbed out of the reports going back to 2016. Well, it seems to me that's a pretty basic report to the public. How are our operations doing before we have to go to the tax levy? And I just can't understand why that would be knocked out. I mean, it's strange in that this is one of your financial measurements that you put in 2015. So if that's still one of your measurements, why would the accounting knock it out? That just doesn't make any sense to me. The only thing I can think of is some attempt to start moving towards a total revenue approach where it blurs the property tax receipts with operating revenues, and I think that's of real concern. So I welcome your response, if any of you are willing to do it, to say whether you're in favor of this or not. I don't know if this was an official act by the commission, or was this done by the port staff? The other issue I want to address is more of an omission, and I think that's been a long time coming, was the port uses 4.5 million in bond revenue, principal and interest. Now that's a pretty major expense, but it's not allocated to the operating units. The only time I've ever seen it allocated at all was in the crane analysis, and that was a shocking one, because if you just took marine terminal accounting without depreciation, would show for the 5 years a loss of like 280,000. But if you put the cash outlay of bond principal and interest of 1.4 million or whatever it was, the loss would be turned into a 1.5 million cash loss. So that's a pretty material item. So I welcome your comments on either or both of those. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Langens. Next, we have public comment, Wayne Olson. Wayne.
My name is Wayne Olson, a resident of Lacey. Thank you for your interest in my recommendation of last Thursday's special commissioners meeting about requiring solar PV systems being included with any construction of warehouse or large buildings at the New Market Industrial Park. I sent an email to you Friday expanding my rationale for that recommendation. In general, I am still not in favor of your overall plan to remove portions of the mature forest for warehouses, but implementing this recommendation would help compensate for the lost carbon sequestration and would be in keeping with the spirit and goals of the newly approved Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. There's another major benefit of solar panel installations I didn't mention before and would like to share with you now. We are in the midst of a decade of rapid transformation of our energy sources as the world is responding to the climate crisis. In addition to solar panels, battery prices have also plummeted 70 to 90% over the last decade. New EV car prices are expected to be identical with gas-powered models within 2 years, then become cheaper as mass production ramps up, with the trucking industry not far behind. Tesla and a number of other truck manufacturers are gearing up to produce big rigs of short and medium hauls. The Tesla Semi was first announced in 2017, though now delayed until 2022 in 2 models with a 300 or 500 mile range. Tesla plans to charge them with a Tesla Mega Charger powered by solar panels. There may already be a small percentage of electric big rigs on the road by the time the first new market warehouse is completed. Just think what transition to electricity will mean for warehouse operations. Trucks arrive and depart with little noise and no exhaust fumes or particulate matter, maybe not even grease oil spots. While being loaded and unloaded, they can be recharged on the spot. Upon departure, they may only need to stop at a truck stop for snacks, not diesel fuel. Warehouse loading vehicles running on batteries instead of natural gas, if not already. Overall operations will be much quicker, more efficient, much healthier, and much cheaper, considering the solar panel lifetime of 30 to 40 years. Transition for electric cars and trucks by 2050 will reduce our county's carbon emissions by about 30%. Same for the rest of the US and for the world. I hope I have convinced you that solar and batteries are 2 of the keys that will help make a future look a little bit brighter for our grandchildren. If you really need to allow warehouses on the new market property, please make them a state-of-the-art showcase. It should be a bonanza for marketing and a model for the rest of the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Our next public comment comes from Helen Wheatley.
Good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, I guess so.
Hi, Helen.
Okay. Well, my public comment today is the Capitol Lake Deschutes Estuary Draft EIS. As you know, the City of Olympia has registered its support for an estuary option. Port commissioners may believe that the port is not weighing in on this particular matter of a particular choice, but the port has already gone on record with something very significant in the draft EIS that commissioners and the public should be aware of. The draft EIS has a section on navigation, and more important, there's considerably more detail in attachment 6, the navigation discipline report. The devil is always in the details. The draft EIS informs us that the cargo ships currently calling at the port are about 660 feet long and 100 feet wide. It points out that the existing authorized channel depth is minus 30 feet, and the port's responsible for getting the vessel berths to minus 39. Despite dredging in 2014, there's already a need for maintenance dredge, which is being delayed by questions about how to dispose of the dredged materials with toxins. The EIS states that, quote, the port has indicated they would like to welcome Panamax and Neo-Panamax vessels, ships designed to the dimensions necessary to pass through the Panama Canal, to their berths. This would require dredging deeper and wider. Panamax vessels are typically anywhere from 650 to 820 feet long, and they need about 3 more feet of draft than our port tries to accommodate. Neo-Panamax vessels are 161 feet wide. Remember, current vessels are about 100 and can be up to 1,200 feet long. Most important, Neo-Panamax requires a 50-foot draft. This desire to bring Panamax and Neo-Panamax vessels is nowhere in Port Vision 2050 or any of the other port outreach or planning documents that I'm aware of. Yet this is all that the port has to say to the state of Washington in regard to alternatives for the Deschutes River. It sees a Neo-Panamax future for itself despite any issues of community scale, dredging, and depth or environmental impacts. Panamax may not fit with our climate future or how shipping evolves. Do commissioners believe that the public can support this dream? Do they believe that it's compatible with an estuary? Since the port has already stated its view of the future, it is time for the port to explain how it foresees doing this with an estuary option. Otherwise, it looks like the port has already voted to keep the dam. Thank you once again for the opportunity to comment this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Wheatley. Next, public comment comes from John Van Enwick. And John, I apologize if I mispronounced your last name.
Okay, can you hear me? Am I coming through? Good, okay. Thank you very much, commissioners, for taking my comment. And Joe, you pronounced my name perfectly. I appreciate that. Thank you
Yes.
very much. It's not an easy one to do. My concern tonight really is more about the value of what the port does as opposed to the specific incidents like the estuary, which I support, and the port as a deep water port, which I do not support. But what I'd like to talk about is the 200 acres of forest land down on South near New Market Square that is going to be clear cut for warehouses. One of the issues we face here in Olympia is a dwindling area of natural forest land. And as a clinical professor up at the School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, I would like to point out that they have been doing research up there on how cognitive development proceeds in children most adequately. And what they have found is that wild places do more to help children develop the ability to accommodate complexity in their thinking than anything else. And what we're going to do is we're going to destroy that, and we're going to put there asphalt. And asphalt, of course, cannot be changed. I mean, those forests will never be here again. So in terms of the value of what the port owns and the value of what the port can develop, natural wild places are very, very important for our future, whereas asphalt and warehouses are not. As we know, the port does not turn a profit. The port relies on citizen taxation to survive. We know, for example, that the deal with Weyerhaeuser has been pretty much of a disaster. I cannot tell you the number of people who have said to me, I cannot afford wood for my project at home, and look at what's being exported overseas by the port. And one of my friends once said that only third world countries export their resources unprocessed. So people are getting a very negative view of the port. The port wants to just develop at whatever cost, and what I mean cost to the taxpayers. Other people have cited that, other people have mentioned that. So in terms of the value of what the port has, our future in terms of natural spaces for the citizens of Thurston County to be able to enjoy, to be able to use for healthful purposes is far more important than a money-losing proposition for a warehouse or a money-losing proposition for Weyerhaeuser. We really don't need that. Let's take what we have and use it wisely, preserve it, preserve our natural spaces, and create something that our future generations will be able to benefit from, as opposed to hard asphalt, which can never be removed. Thank you very much for taking my comments. I really appreciate your doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Van Enwick. Thank you for your comments. I'd like to circle back to Lynn Fitzhugh. She signed up for a public comment. Lynn, are you on our meeting tonight?
Unfortunately, I still do not see Lynn.
Okay, I'm gonna guess I see two hands raised. I see somebody named Janine, another person named Lee Reiner. And so I'm gonna ask, and also Judy Barton. So I'm gonna go down that list. Janine, are you on the call, and would you like to give a public comment?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I really appreciate John's comments there. Thanks for those, especially the part about impervious surfaces and tree cover, which we've got a big commitment to make to the Thurston County Climate Action Plan. So thank you for those comments. I was going to start by a big question, wondering how it was that the ILA Panattoni deal was still on the action calendar, but I got here just in time to discover that you'd taken it off and put it on advisory. So thank you. Kudos for that. I guess I'm here to, once again, to make comments about the concerns of this project, the Panattoni project, the exploded size of that project, one which ballooned greatly from our conversations about it just a few months ago. Here's a few concerns you've heard many times before. It's side-by-side close proximity to our children at a middle school, and that's regardless of which direction you make the trucks drive. The environmental impacts, which include and especially concern the large tree cover and the relationship therein to the Thurston Climate Action Plan, the pollution, the fumes, the light pollution, the noise, the close by residential location of an operation this huge, and now conflicting reports of pocket gopher habitat and possible mitigation. This is anything but ready for prime time, and I'm attending and commenting once again to make sure that this is not another fly under the radar scheme to overrule our residents' voices, to get involved with what looks increasingly to many of us like another port financial boondoggle and big corporate giveaway, and to make sure that the development in our region is thoughtfully conceived, it's actually gainful to all our region in good, wholesome ways, good economic ways, good employment ways, that it's sustainable and it's done intelligently. This is the requirement of all, and I repeat, all of us, is we move forward in a different world than the one we lived in 5 years ago. I request and thank you for deeply listening to your region's many concerns as you go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine, for your comments. Our next we have Lee Reiner, I think. I hope I didn't mispronounce it. Lee, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm sorry, can you hear me? Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Hi.
Thank you. Yes, I also wanted to talk about the new market development proposal with Panettone and the warehouses in the center of Tumwater. My concern was the injection wells that will have to be put into place for this huge proposed warehouse that Panettone has been talking about. I know that essentially the warehouse is so big that to take the stormwater from this huge facility, these impervious surfaces, there is no place that that stormwater can go except to be injected into the ground, into the aquifer beneath the facility. And I think that was discussed before a little while ago in this discussion. Essentially, these injection wells now have been used. I know the city of Vancouver, Washington recently put these injection wells into place for a warehouse. These injection wells take up the stormwater. Well, unfortunately, the stormwater opening was on a road and a truck had overturned. The diesel fuel went into the stormwater opening. And so they injected the diesel fuel into the aquifer, the drinking water aquifer of the city of Vancouver, Washington. So I believe these ideas of having a huge warehouse is not sustainable. It would contaminate the drinking water of Tumwater. And I don't understand why the city of Tumwater or the Port of Olympia would even consider this sort of warehouse proposal with these type of environmental concerns that would actually damage our ability to have drinking water. Plus, this Panettone agreement, I believe, is good for the next 24 years. So everybody on this panel, except maybe one, will be dead in the ground, but our heirs and our children and our grandchildren are going to have to deal with this. And I hope you look very closely into your brain and ask yourself, do you want your children to deal with contaminated water because you allowed injection wells from a Panettone warehouse for the next over 20 years? I really do not understand how you could go along with this this fabrication. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Reiner. Next, we have Judy Barton would like to speak. Judy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I'm Judy Barton. I'm a retired environmental epidemiologist for the State Department of Health, and I used to work in air quality and health. So I'm speaking for myself tonight, but I just wanted to point out, last week I spoke about the danger of air pollution, especially from truck traffic, especially diesel exhaust, which is an environmental carcinogen. In fact, the International Agency for Research on Cancer from the World Health Organization has classified it as a class 1 human carcinogen because it is so is linked to lung cancer. So one of the comments that was made by Mr. Alan Rowe, and that's what I'm speaking to tonight, was because I commented, I don't know if he was commenting in relation to my comments, was just that, you know, I mentioned that there was, the community would be exposed, but especially children in the school that's close to this development had the potential for exposure. And he said that the school was already close to I-5 or a major transportation corridor, and which had heavy truck traffic. And so sort of implying that kids were already exposed. However, I want to point out that we're dealing with an environmental carcinogen, a class 1 carcinogen, and that exposures are cumulative. And with this type of carcinogen, you have what's called a dose response relationship. So the higher the exposure, the increase in risk. So it's not just that you're exposed and you might get cancer. The more you're exposed, it can double or triple your chances of getting cancer. So each additional impact from air pollution, especially diesel exhaust, is cumulative. And I want you to consider that. Thank you for taking my comments tonight.
Thank you, Judy, for your comments. We have time for one more public comment. If anybody else would like to give public comment, I don't have any other indications of people desiring. Oh, wait, I see a name of somebody by the name of Patrick. So our last public comment at this point in the meeting will be from Patrick.
Hello, commissioners. I'm Patrick Canready. Sorry, my last name didn't pop up there, but thank you for letting me comment. The Salmon Creek Basin Neighborhood Association, I'm president of the Salmon Creek Basin Neighborhood Association, and we represent over 225 family residents to the south and southeast of Bush Middle School in the Tumwater School District. On behalf of the association, we appreciate the opportunity to voice our serious concerns and questions over the port's proposed approval of the warehouse development project by Panettone Incorporated in the New Harbor Market Industrial Campus between Kimmy and Center Streets. Our concerns with the proposed development cover 5 general areas: traffic and accessibility. These streets are the main access arterials for our neighborhood. We're concerned about future increased impacts on traffic, especially with the increase of large trucks and semis. If Kimmy Road's closed to the north of 83rd, more traffic will be concentrated onto Center Street, which is the only northern access to Tumwater. This would seemingly significantly increase traffic congestion. It has been stated that truck traffic will only enter and exit to the north of the development, but how will that be enforced? And by who? There's also proposed expansion by International Wood Pulp Company on 83rd Avenue and Center Street. It was stated by Commissioner Downing last week, I believe, that through his personal communication, that none of their trucks utilize 83rd or Kimmy Street. I think you used the 100% for southern access or exit. Personal observations from neighboring residents would disagree. This is always the case. Environmental, we have increased concerns about flooding potential. You probably remember 15 years ago when our neighborhood association wrote you a letter about the 197 acres trees along Kimmy Street and our opposition to their removal due to flooding concerns in our neighborhood. Our board members canvassed neighborhood residences, signed a petition voting our concerns. When we weren't able to contact everyone, over 100 neighbors signed that petition. And subsequently, the city of Tumwater passed an ordinance restricting big warehouse development due to concerns with the significant increase in truck volume. dangerous to public safety and environmental impacts, including documented flooding issues. Land clearing and removal of mature trees and vegetation, coupled with massive increases of impervious surfaces, pavement, building roofing, and associated runoff will only exacerbate the problem with loss of natural groundwater absorption. When the Kimi Street Road was replaced almost 10 years ago, it was a wet mess and very costly to complete, with portions needing to be redone because of the high groundwater issues during construction. We can show photos of all the flooding around Kimi Street, blocking driveways and intersections, making much of it impassable. Some neighbors had to paddle boats to their houses, and some lost their septic tanks from the flooding. Loss of natural habitat and buffers. This area is one of the last vestiges of urban forests in the county, providing habitat for many species of birds and wildlife, as well as ongoing recreational opportunities.
Thank you, Patrick, for your comments. I'm sorry, but to cut you off, but you're about 30 seconds over.
Okay,
3 minutes.
that's okay. I appreciate it. I submitted written comments. Thank you.
We got those. Thank you so much for your
You're welcome.
public comments.
Thank you for listening.
So at this point, commissioners, we might or might not be done with public comment. I will make the call for additional public comment at the end of the meeting. So now at this point, I'd like to go to commission response. Commissioner McGregor or Zita, would you like to respond to some of the comments you've heard tonight?
Go ahead, Commissioner McGregor.
Ladies first.
Go backwards. Mr. Hanratty, thank you for your comments enumerating the many concerns of the Salmon Creek Basin neighbors. Over 225 families who will be directly impacted by the Panatoni development if it proceeds. Traffic, environmental concerns, flooding, which is, I understand your neighborhood is the worst flooding area in the county. It's a high groundwater hazard area. Public health and safety impacts, lost habitat and recreational opportunities. And I'm sorry you didn't have time to finish, but thank you for representing your neighborhood concerns. And I do take those seriously. Dr. Barton, you remind us that diesel fumes are carcinogenic and that exposure to diesel fumes is a cumulative risk. The kids at Bush Middle School are exposed to diesel fumes. There's a few hundred trucks per day that go up and down Kimi Street right now. There's also about 100 acres of forest that buffers the kids from some of those impacts. The forest absorbs CO2 and protects the kids from some of the diesel fumes from the truck traffic and the highway. Loss of the forest in Newmarket Industrial Campus would not only increase truck traffic exponentially, but it would remove the tree buffers and replace them with thin strips of baby trees. Ms. Reiner and a number of other people are concerned about injection wells being used to handle stormwater for these warehouses. In the 2015 draft master plan for this area, there were 54 acres devoted to storm ponds. The plan was to cut down most of the forest and use the highest and best land for storm ponds because that was the only dry land. And then the wetter lower land would be filled with gravel and raised up so the buildings could be developed. That's what's necessary in a place like the Salmon Creek Basin and this high groundwater hazard area that Panatoni is looking at developing if you use conventional storm ponds. There are 0 acres of storm ponds, however, in the current map of the Panatoni plan. And the only way that can happen is if the storm water is handled differently. Expert sources, and I want to thank the former state hydrogeologist, what was your name? Barbara Carey, I want to thank you and other sources who have informed me and possibly other port commissioners that the plan here is to inject Panatone's stormwater into deep wells. These deep wells will be around Tumwater's major drinking water aquifer. This development surrounds the Bush wellhead, which is Tumwater's primary source of drinking water. If there is a spill from any of the Panatone trucks or any other vehicle or industrial accident into one of these deep UIC wells, it has the potential to contaminate Tumwater's main drinking water supply. An accident just like this happened in the city of Vancouver in 2013. And 5 years later, they were still measuring contaminants in that water supply. Now, I have not seen a presentation from the port on what exactly the stormwater plan will be. I have seen a presentation from the port saying, we don't want big storm ponds. And indeed, there are no big storm ponds. I've also seen in the port's presentation an assurance that public drinking water supplies would be protected. I have seen no details on how public drinking water supplies would be protected. So we need to know, what is the stormwater plan? If it is deep UIC wells, how on earth can you expect those to be safe when they are surrounding Bush wellhead, the primary drinking water supply in Tumwater? We need much more information about this, and we need staff to be fully transparent on this matter. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeta. Commissioner McGregor.
Thank you. You've brought up lots of interesting comments tonight, some of which we've heard on Thursday as well. I appreciate that. I have taken notes on what everybody had to say. Some of the things are just assumptions. We don't know what's going to go there. We know that there'll be some form of development in there in the form of warehouses, as you saw depicted on a conceptual. But that all has to go through an extensive permit process, and I believe an EIS and maybe even a SEPA. And so all of those things will be discussed during that, and the design of whatever is going to go there, whatever is going to be used there, will be in accordance with whatever is permitted by the environmental regulations in place today. So I'm not going to get into the details of all that. I was interested to hear that we have something in there in our developments, and I was taking notes, so I didn't have it all accurate, about Panamax and Neomax. I don't know that I've heard anything on that. So before, and I don't know if we have anything in our documentation, but sure willing to look at that and ask questions from the staff if they've heard of it. In any event, thank you for your comments. They all are very viable and all very relative, and we'll see where this project goes relative to the project. So in case Commissioner Zeta is wondering what I was referring to.
Thank you, Commissioner McGregor. I just have a few comments. First of all, thank you to the 10 or so folks that gave public comment tonight. A lot of interesting ideas and comments. And you're probably all wondering, you might say, what makes me tech? I mean, why am I mean, it's no big secret that I've been in favor of this development, but I'm watching it closely and listening to the objections. And I'd like to remind the public that we also have the city of Tumwater that is, riding herd on this project, and anything the port would like to do has to pass, existing zoning and get the support of the Tumwater City Council. So it's a multi-step process. I'm in favor of developing this land because it's economic development. It brings taxes, tax revenue to the school districts. It brings tax revenue to the city of Tumwater and other entities. It also brings jobs, and people need jobs. And that's part of the mission of the Port of Olympia is economic growth. So it does bring jobs. It's debatable, how good warehouse jobs are versus light industrial. But speaking of warehouses, I have you might say a philosophical view of warehouses. I don't like them. I don't dislike them. They just are part of the fabric of the way we live in America. We're consumers, we consume things. Just for example, Tumwater has already approved a 1 million square foot warehouse for Costco just south of 93rd. I wonder if there's anybody on tonight that doesn't shop at Costco. Probably not, maybe a tiny bit at least. Anyway, Costco is wonderful. It's a wonderful store. Home Depot is a wonderful store. There's a lot of warehouses in Thurston County already pertaining to some of these supporters, if you will, of the way we live. So that's, and lastly, I'm very committed to providing appropriate buffers for the Bush Middle School. We've talked about closing Kimmy Street. That was the port's idea. We close Kimmy Street, we eliminate the possibility of trucks going down Kimmy Street. And I said at my last meeting that if people are concerned about even any trucks going down Center Street to a circuitous route to the freeway going south, as opposed to a very direct route going north, the city of Tumwater can always just say no trucks allowed on that city street. So, and just a few of my comments, but I thank you for your comments. Thank you, Mr. Langens, for keeping an eye on our finances for us, and take note of what you said and take a look at that. I think there was a discussion of injection wells, but now I kind of know what those are and appreciate that discussion. So a lot of good comments, so thank you. Next on the agenda then is the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve? The consent calendar contains bills and vouchers for July in the amount for batches 26 through 30 in the amount of $767,000, 416.78. It also includes approval of the minutes of June 14, 2021 and June 21, 2021 commission work session. So do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I would move to approve the consent calendar, bills and vouchers as stated. I would also move to approve the approval of the minutes that were amended, that were sent out, that had some changes that were kind of late entries into the approval of the minutes. So I would move that all of that consent calendar be approved.
Second the motion.
Thank you, commissioners. All in favor of approving the consent calendar, please say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we move to the action other calendar. And we have the Capitol Lake Deschutes Estuary Draft Environmental Impact Statement, comment letter, and our own Lisa Parks are relatively brand new Capital Investment Planning and Environmental Program Director. Welcome, Lisa, to our meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. So I'm here tonight to give you a brief rundown on the comment letter that the Port of Olympia has put together in draft form at this point on the Capitol Lake Deschutes Estuary Long-Term Management Plan. So next slide, please. So just as a little bit of background, the draft environmental impact statement was issued on June 30th of this year. The lead agency is the Department of Enterprise Services. Again, the project is the Capitol Lake Deschutes Estuary Long-Term Management Program. The purpose of this project is to, as you can see, is to identify an environmentally and economically sustainable way to manage the Capitol Lake and Deschutes Estuary. And then the project goals are also to improve water quality, manage existing sediment accumulation and future deposition, and to improve ecological functions and enhance community use of the resource. So this is a very large document. There's 638 pages in the draft EIS itself. There are 14 additional distinct discipline reports in addition to that, those pages. There was an initial 45-day comment period that was extended to 60 days by Department of Enterprise Services. So the comments are actually due on August 29th, 2021. The draft EIS looks at 3 primary alternatives in addition to the typical no action alternative that's required by the State Environmental Policy Act. Those three alternatives are for a managed lake alternative, an estuary, and then a hybrid of those two alternatives. And I wanted to just say that the staff review in this process was focused at a very high level. And we were looking primarily at topics of concern specific to the Port of Olympia. And those are, as you see there, navigation and maintenance dredging, federal permitting, sediment management, mitigation implementation, and recreation access. Next slide. So the draft EIS specifically is requesting suggestions for improving the environmental analysis that was provided, providing comments on methodology that was used in any of the analyses, requests for additional information or additional or revised mitigation measures. And so because it is requested as such, the port's comments at this time are very technical in nature. So the letter specifically does not identify or comment on which alternative should be the preferred alternative. And I would just point out that any future request from Department of Enterprise Services for the port to take a position on a preferred alternative would definitely come back before the commission for your direction. So our draft letter specifically, again, does not take a position on the preferred alternative. Instead, it identifies concerns and questions that we had from a technical basis related to certain assumptions and analyses that were provided in the document. And we request additional investigation and analyses as well as collaboration, both with the Port District as well as with other agencies. So next slide, please. Our next steps are we have submitted the draft letter to the United States Army Corps of Engineers. We're asking not for their review and approval necessarily, but we would really like to confirm our understanding of certain federal permitting processes that we have commented on. Want to make sure that we're accurate in our statements. We do have special counsel, Schwabe, Williamson, and Wyatt, that we also sent it to for their review and comment. And so our plan would be to finalize the draft letter for signature and be able to submit that then to Department of Enterprise Services by the August 29th deadline. Next slide. So we have a suggested motion for the commission's consideration, and you can see it there on the slide, and I can answer any questions if there are some.
Thank you, Lisa. So commissioners, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Let's just go around the room and see who has questions of Lisa about this draft letter. Commissioner McGregor, do you have any questions?
Oh, sorry about that. I don't really have any questions. Just a comment, if I can make it on. I did send. Yeah,
Commissioner McGregor, excuse me. I'm trying to do questions only.
Well, then I don't have any.
Okay, then we'll come back to your comments. Thank you.
Thank
Commissioner Zeta, do you have any questions for Lisa right now?
No, I have comments.
Oh, thank you. I had one question, but you answered it, Lisa, when you looked at, can you go back one slide? You could go at next steps. You said you already sent a draft over to the Corps of Engineers, and you sent the draft over to the special counsel, and realizing we're under time constraints, any substantive changes you would bring back to the commission, have to bring back to the commission in a special meeting, but you're not expecting that because finalize the draft for signature. And again, this is due back to DES by the 29th, I believe, of this month.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, now I'm back to you, Commissioner McGregor. Do you have any comments about this?
No, yes, I do. First of all, I think it was very well done. I read the letter several times over to make sure I was understanding it. I sent Ms. Parks a email on Friday, I think it was Friday, about one question I had on the second page, paragraph 2, the last sentence. I was having trouble trying to figure out what it was saying, but she is going to reword that, I think. And so it's not a substantial change that I would consider that would have to come back to us. I just think it needs a little more clarity. So thank you for that. I think you've met my expectations, which is talking about the navigation and maintenance dredging, as well as what are we going to do with sediment management. As we all know, there is environmentally sensitive dirt, silt, whatever you want to call it down there. And the more that we get clean fill on top of contaminated fill creates a real issue, because then it all is considered contaminated. So anyway, that was it. And I think you've highlighted that, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Zeta, do you have any comments over this letter?
Yes, I'm concerned with the tone, the content, and the construction of parts of this letter. The first couple pages are really quite general, talking about the structure of the process and how appreciative we are of the opportunity to provide our comments and grateful to have participated in the work. And thank you for providing the opportunity. And we appreciate all the work that's been done. But the rest of the letter is really quite aggressive, confrontational. It's a fighting tone. And it's clear that the bottom line here is that the port feels that EIS has not treated the dredging issues fairly, that they've treated the port unfairly. And the language is quite strong, and I would say is really unfair. We accuse EIS of lack of impartiality, of inconsistency, and just a couple of pages after we say what a great and professional job they did. So, you know, if this letter is gonna take on a fighting tone, let's forget the veneer of thank you, you did a great job for the first 2 pages. Just come out fighting and be honest about it. I disagree with that fighting tone, but I understand that probably represents the majority perspective on port leadership. As far as the construction of the letter, I would ask that it be checked again for subject verb agreement. It's embarrassing when there's a singular subject and a plural verb, or vice versa, and that happens quite a lot in here.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeta. Thank you, Commissioner McGregor, for your comments. My comments are these. I think for the benefit of the general public, I'll paraphrase in my own way what I see in this 5-page letter is that the port wants to ensure that DES is working with the Army Corps of Engineers, because they're a federal agency and they have a lot of say-so over sedimentation and dredging and so on and so forth. It points out the little bit inconsistencies of the impact of dredging. And, I think that's accurate. There was a statement in there saying, if the port doesn't dredge, then the dredged material coming from the estuary won't make a big difference. And that was pointed out as being inconsistent. And I agree. It also points out that not much work has been done, or not enough work has been done on who will pay for this, and identifying community partners that are willing to step up to the plate and commit to paying millions of dollars for the for really any change. And remember, it's responsibility to keep the lake dredged. And so that's part of the reason why we find ourselves here. And lastly, the letter points out equity and recreational access, which is so because okay, I'll wrap up real quick. So equity in recreational access is important too. So those are my comments. Am I coming in okay?
Not really. No,
You're
you're
broken
fading
up
in and
on
out.
couple of occasions, but the gist of it came through.
Yeah, we got the main point.
Okay. At this point, turning to public comment on before we, if there's no more discussion.
I would like to
We'll,
respond to Commissioner Downing.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Commissioner Zeta.
So this letter emphasizes, and you feel the emphasis is appropriate, that this summary statement that if this dredging does not occur and if the estuary hybrid alternative is selected, then additional sediment deposition is not expected to significantly impact the Port of Olympia because navigation is already impaired. You say, and our letter says, hey, that's not fair. I hear you saying that. I hear the letter saying that. However, the sentence before that sets a context that is missing. The need for dredging and dredging action is separate from and not related to long-term management alternatives for the Capital Lake Deschutes Estuary project. No matter what happens with Capital Lake Deschutes Estuary, the port's nav channel and turning basin are already too shallow. We have needed to dredge for a long time. We can't afford to. The Army Corps of Engineers will pay for the dredge. We can't afford to dispose of the contaminated sediments. That's already a limitation. So no matter what alternative is chosen, we're already in this situation where we need to dredge, we haven't, and it's not clear we can afford to. So that is the context that's missing here. And to say that EEIS is being unfair to us by acknowledging that, we got our heads in the sand or in the sediment.
At this time, we're going to turn to, before we can take a vote on this, I'd like to get a motion and a second, please. A motion to Lisa, could you pull up that motion
Point
again?
of order, public comment.
Correct, Commissioner Zeta. We, if there's a motion and a second, then before we vote, we turn to public comment. So I would move to authorize Commission Chair Downing to sign the port's draft EIS public comment letter and submit it to the Department of Enterprise Services. Is there a second?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded to authorize Commission Chair Downing to sign the port's draft EIS public comment letter and submit it to the Department of Enterprise Services. So at this time, I would welcome public comment on this one item because it's under the action of their calendar. And so is there any public comment on the Capital Lake EIS letter? I see Carla Wolfsberg has raised her hand. Carla, would you like to speak?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. I'd just like to know, has this letter been presented to the public in full? And is it available? Because if the public hasn't had a chance to read it, word for word, it's difficult to comment on it. All we're hearing is general statements about it. So I'd like to know, is this something that you're planning on putting on the website, allowing the public to read and then have an opportunity to comment on, or do we have to comment now when we haven't had a chance to read it?
Thank you, Carla. I can just say quick.
Point of order, commission
FYI
response after,
that
point of order, commission response will be after public comment. After all public comment.
Point of order is accepted. Is there any other public comment regarding the Capital Lake port response to the Capital Lake draft EIS? Charlotte Persons, would you like to speak?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
I just would like to say, I would like to say that it is a little confusing, your letter, because it seems to be, has a number of concerns with a couple of the alternatives, while at the same time you are refusing to choose an alternative as the one that you prefer. And that sends sort of a mixed message, not just to the public, but I would think also to the environmental impact statement team, and to all of the other people that are doing this planning with you. And I would hope that you would clarify this letter and make it clear that you may have some concerns, but that you are ready to go along with any of the alternatives. I think that would make it clearer than just say we're not choosing an alternative. And that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you so much, Charlotte, for your comments. Next, we have Sue Danver wishing to give comment on this item. Sue? I think you're muted.
Okay.
Sue.
This is very simple. Your motion to be considered doesn't say Capital Lake on it. It just says a comment letter to the to enterprises. I think you should identify what the comment letter is on, maybe. Because I stepped out of the room and I just came back and I go, what are they talking about? And it just said comment letter. So I would suggest that correction.
Thank you, Sue, for that public comment.
Okay, thank you.
And I see Helen Wheatley, you have your hand up. Helen?
Thank you. Well, I was just wondering if anyone wanted to comment or provide clarification on the fact that the draft EIS, again, the only thing that it says that points to a preference is the discussion of wanting to welcome Panamax cargo ships in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Wheatley. Is anybody else liking to give public comment at this time on this one item, the response letter from the port to DES regarding the Capital Lake Deschutes Estuary study? Okay, with that, commissioners, would you like to respond to any of the public comment you heard? Commissioners McGregor or Zeta?
I'll go first this time, if I might. Yeah, the letter, the complete letter was posted in the packet as a revision on Friday. So the complete letter that was there for everyone to who pulled up the packet to look at on the port's website. I think Sue has a valid point about making sure that we amend the motion to include the Capital Lake nomenclature so that it's very specific. And I still don't know where I'm seeing Panamax being used in here. If we were to do Panamax vessels, we'd have to go back. We're only authorized to dredge to a certain amount, and I think it's actually minus 42 at mean low water along the berth, and I think it's less than that in the channel. So, but in any event, we would have to petition the Army Corps of Engineers. We'd have to go through a very voluminous permitting process to get from where we are today to anything deeper. The Columbia River went down to minus 50 at mean low water, and it took them many years and lots of documentation in order to get approval to go to that depth. And then, of course, the cost of getting to that depth was borne by some of those ports that are impacted by it. So that's my only question. I think Ms. Danver brings up a valid point about adding that to the motion. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Zeta.
I want to apologize to Ms. Wolfsburg that the letter appeared in the revised packet. I know it's hard to keep track when revisions come out shortly before a meeting. And I apologize. I get confused by those things too sometimes. Dr. Wheatley, thank you for alerting us to the port's preference for Panamax ships. I have missed that also, and I'll look for your written comments. I'm sure you give us a direct reference to that. And I know that perfect citizens like you and Ms. Wolfsburg, who attend most of these meetings and really keep track of what we're doing, often know more than we do about what's going on certain things. Bringing Panamax ships to the Port of Olympia would be nuts. We really can't compete with SeaTac and especially Port of Vancouver, Canada. And as Commissioner McGregor says, we're nowhere near the mean low water level that would be required. It would be a major dredge. So if that is in any of our statements, we should certainly take another look at that, because that's not a good fit for the Port of Olympia.
Thank you, commissioners, for your comments. And the only comment I'll comment on is that to Ms. Pearson's persons is that looking for people to, at this point, take a position on any of the alternatives, but rather give them feedback on the report itself, the reasoning and the technical aspects and so forth, which I think we did. And so I'm totally comfortable with not taking position on a preferred alternative because DS didn't ask for it. And so with that, can we bring back up the motion, please? So I think that Ms. Danver mentioned that there was I'm gonna go ahead and withdraw my motion. And I'm gonna ask my fellow commissioners for a revised motion that it reflects more specifically what the public comment letter is related.
I will move to authorize Commissioner Chair Downing to sign the port's draft EIS public comment letter regarding Capitol Lake and submit it to the Department of Enterprise Services.
If you're going to make that motion, you must revise it because the proper title is Capitol Lake Deschutes Estuary.
That's fine. Include that in there then.
Thank you, Commissioner McGregor. Would you like to restate that motion, please?
Move to authorize Commissioner Chair Downing to sign the port's draft EIS public comment letter regarding Capitol Lake Deschutes Estuary. And is that correct, Commissioner Zeta? And submit to the Department of Enterprise Services by August 29th.
Thank you, Commissioner McGregor. Is there a second? I'll second.
Discussion.
So it's been moved in. Pardon, let me just 1 second, Commissioner Zeta. It's been moved and seconded to authorize Commissioner Chair Downing to sign the port's draft EIS public comment letter regarding Capitol Lake Deschutes Estuary and submit it to the Department of Enterprise Services by August 29. Is there any further discussion?
As the representative to Capitol Lake Deschutes Estuary Executive Work Group, who's served on that for the longest of any of the commissioners in this room, I will be dismayed if this commission approves this letter. It is not collegial. All the other entities at the table are supportive of, they have said they'll support whatever option the EIS comes up with, DES comes up with. And some have specified that they will support the estuary, and some have specified they will support only the estuary. For us to send a letter like this is a slap in our community partners' face. And I urge my fellow commissioners to send it back to the drawing board to draft something that is not as offensive.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeta. Well, I have two things to say regarding your comments. One is that the pressure is on the port to respond quickly, and that pressure comes from Department of Enterprise Services giving the public only 60 days to review a 600+ page document and formulate a response. As you know, public entities move a little slower. We have to have multiple meetings, etc. So we're up against the timeline. And secondly, as I said earlier, the DES was not looking for entities, people on the executive work group or whomever, to weigh in as to what option they favored. They wanted honest and direct feedback on the draft EIS. So I frankly think that you know, when you talk about slaps in the face, I mean, I was surprised that the city of Olympia took a position on what they wanted without allowing to EIS or DES complete their work. So I was quite surprised by that.
Yeah, my only comment is that they are not looking for us to choose an alternative. That is their responsibility. What they're looking for is for us to provide information on where we think they need to do a little more work and analysis. And in particular, they even included in the presentation that they had expanded the project area to include Bud Inlet. And yet they don't have any control over Bud Inlet. That's a federal navigation channel. So therefore, the information is incomplete because they haven't included the Army Corps, who has actual authority over the navigation channel. So I think it's entirely appropriate that the letter is to be sent as is written, and to let them know that we are not going to be choosing an alternative, because that's not what they're asking for.
I'm not asking you to choose an alternative. I'm asking us to be collegial with our community partners. In fact, DES has included the Army Corps of Engineers in this study. I understand that it's a big lift to read a big study like this, and we should not attack DES for requiring that we provide comment. We should credit them for extending the public comment. Their initial public comment period was 45 days, which is longer than the required 30. And they have extended it an additional 2 weeks. So Commissioner Downing, it really doesn't help our case to say, oh, this is all DES's fault. And it doesn't help our case to say, well, you didn't include Army Corps of Engineers, when they actually did include the Army Corps of Engineers. The more collegial we can be in this process, the better.
Call for the question.
The question's been called for. All those in favor of authorizing Commissioner Chair Downing to sign the port's draft EIS public comment letter regarding Capitol Lake Deschutes Estuary and submit it to the Department of Enterprise Services by August 29th, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay. Call for a roll call vote.
Thank you, Commissioners, for that action other item. Next, we move to the advisory calendar. And the first item we have is the Q2 financial report. Our own Myung-Hee Lee, Port Finance Manager, will be presenting.
Yes, and Commissioner Downing, if I might, while Myung-Hee is being brought in as a panelist, can I offer some introductory remarks?
Please go ahead.
Great. I will let her be brought in. Great. So as the commission is aware, we hired the firm Malfoster and Alongi to perform an organizational assessment earlier this year. The results of that were presented to the commission in June of this year. And some of the results and recommendations from that assessment are now being presented in this financial report. So we're starting to implement some of their recommendations. And so you're going to see that this report looks a bit different from reports presented in the past. And that is drawing upon the recommendations from MFA. So I want to give my thanks to Myung-Hee Lee, Jerry Sevier, and Matt Peach, as well as other finance staff and directors for the work that they put in making a report that we truly hope will be more digestible and understandable by the public and present a clearer idea of what our results have been. So with that, I will turn it over to Myung-Hee Lee.
Good evening, commissioners. Tonight I'm presenting second quarter of 2021 financial performance, and I hope you like what you see. As it's evening said, this is a change format. So next slide, please. Presentation outlines operations and non-operating and net positions, which is called balance sheets. Next slide, please. You're looking at the business unit operations revenue year to date for the June 30th, and total operating revenue was better than 156,000 better than the budget. As you can see, gray line, which represents the budget line, and a red line shows actual, and blue line shows the 2020 actuals. As you can see, we did a lot better. Second slide, please. And you see in the business unit operations also. And total operating budget expense was 585, less than what was budgeted. As you can see in the slide again, actual is better than budget in all business units. And also it looks a lot better than the 2020 actuals. So only Marina was spent slightly more than 2020. Next slide, please. Net operating before income, before depreciation, and as you can see in the graphs, it looks a lot better than what was budgeted again, and we did a lot better than also compared to the 2020 actuals. Looking at the terminal, we did a lot better, extremely well. So this rolls up to the better performance by doing operational cuts and whatnot. We did it, and so we did really good. Next slide, please. Here I have made an arrow. That's not $1.8 million, $1.89 million. It's supposed to be $1.2 million. I'm sorry about the arrow. As you can see, it's just steadily improved it since 2018, and we are doing better. Next slide, please. And you're looking at the operating expense by the category, and with the salaries and benefits, we got total operating expense was at $4.59 million, and the salaries and benefits are $2.3 million, which is 50.3%. And you can see outside services with 18.9%, $865,911. We are doing a lot better than what we have been with the outside services. So that's great news. Next slide, please. Non-operating expense by the category, we can see the bond principals for $1.5 million, and that is 52% of total operating expenses of $2.9 million. Total revenue was $3.7 million. Next slide, please. And 5-year cash trend shows that we are improving a lot. As you can see in 2021, Year to date, we got $1 million in capital reserve fund, and we got a working capital of $8.4 million. I didn't keep track of all of this in second quarters before. Now we are tracking it, so we'll be able to present better next year. And all of these other ones are year to date. And looking at the 2017, we got $3.3 million at the year end. That's less than a $4 million benchmark. So we are doing a lot better here again, cash wise. Next slide, please. Total cash, what is made up of total cash? You can see our total cash is $14 million. We have a working capital of $8.3 million. And capital reserve fund, we had a $1 million. And a capital budget unspent was a 5.8%. So we still got a little bit of unspent capital money we need to spend down. And also we have a bond construction bond that's 6.21%, which is $184,000. And bond debt repayment fund, that's what we accumulated to pay that in the end of the year, which is December 1st. That is $2.6 million. Real estate investment fund, we have $456,000, and others are included in there are petty cashes and foreign trade zones and other cashes in there. So that's where we are with our cash. Next slide, please. And you're looking at the Port of Olympia statement of a net position. As you can see, we got a 1.1% increase in total asset, and that is total liability wise. We are decreased this year by $2.35 million, which means that we paid off our bond debts. That's what it is showing up as that. And total net assets increased by the $3.8 million. We are doing extremely well so far because it has a lot to do with it that we are not spending a lot of money on capitals because of COVID-19. Next slide, please. Any questions?
Thank you, Myung-hee. I'd like to go around the room with the commissioners and just see if anybody has questions, and then we'll go around the room again regarding comments. So any questions at this point? Okay, let's turn to.
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Zita.
So Myung-hee, Dennis Langens brought up a point in his public comment, and I have to say that you and he understand this better than I do, and I want to thank you for presenting this to us. So he said that the, let's see, that the debt wasn't being included, the deletion of loss before tax measure. So loss before tax, earnings or loss before tax is one of those financial measures that we passed way back when, but it's been, it's no longer being reported. Is that right?
We haven't been reporting our financial measures. If you want it, we can put it on it, but for a while, we haven't put it on the financial measures. And then Mr. Langen asked about it, you know, hey, you guys are not deducting that bond payments on the crane we purchased for the marine terminal. Okay, when we purchase stuff from marine terminal, we use gold bonds to purchase, not the revenue bond. If we purchase with the revenue bond, it will go against the marine terminal's revenue. On the other hand, because we are purchased with the gold bond, we cannot. Gold bond payment comes out of the taxpayers, non-operating expenses.
So thanks for that, Myung-hee. I think those are maybe two different, I'm not sure if those are two different issues, but I think Mr. Langens was saying that it's good to have the,
Financial measures.
it's good to have reporting on the financial measures, and wondering what happened to the loss before tax measure. I understand you don't report on all the financial measures every quarter. That's something you do yearly, is that right?
Our policy states that we report quarterly.
Oh,
Some
it
of them.
is. Okay.
Yes.
So we used to see that in our quarterly statements, but not now. And so part of the concern was if those had been, if that financial measure, which we approved long ago, has been removed from past years' quarterly statements on our website, and that would be a concern.
I don't know, but we reported past years, but we presented on our PowerPoints.
Mm-hmm.
But we can, if you guys, commissioners wants it, we can implement that.
So I'm not asking you for any changes, but I guess I'll go back and check myself the quarterly reports from past years, and I hope I would, I don't know who made the decision to delete information from past quarterly reports and how that was executed, but I want to assure Mr. Langens that that was not a decision by the commission, and that is news to this commissioner. And I think, Young-hee, the point about the reporting the Crane's debt, that's a good thing, and we would like to see the debt costs in other areas as well. It's useful to know, because otherwise the debt's kind of all put together and we don't know where it's all going. We have seen in the past this debt is going for this, like Lacey CBC. We pay a certain amount of debt for that every quarter and so forth. And that's useful to know.
I don't think we reported quarterly. I'm not 100% sure, but we didn't report that in quarterly basis, but annually basis, yes. But it is coming straight out of the non-operating, which comes out of the tax revenues, not from the business unit revenues.
Yeah, so
we
it's
pay our debt service with taxpayers.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate that that's coming from tax revenue and the taxpayers are paying for that. And so the taxpayers want to know what they're paying for, where their tax money's going. And I'd like to know too. I don't know if the other commissioners are interested or not, but we have seen that in the past and that's useful. So thank you so much for the information and for your explanation. And I'll follow up by taking a look at those past quarterly reports.
I will do that also. Thank you.
Commissioner McGregor, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I think that it's nice to see these graphs in comparison to year over year, kind of a thing. It lets us know whether we're moving in the right direction. And it looks like, if I was to look at this, we're definitely from 2017, I think on, we have shown improvement in the cash trends, and I think that's right now we have $9,370 in cash according to the graph, which is an increase over last year, and we also have an established $1 million cash reserve. So thank you for the report, Young-hee.
You're welcome, sir.
Young-hee, can you turn back to I guess it's your charts. It's the sixth one that shows non-operating expense by category.
Next
Nope,
slide,
it's a pie chart.
7. There you go. Nope.
Non-operating, so I guess it'd be
8.
a little later in the presentation. There we go. And so the I'd like to say something for the benefit of the public, because Mr. Langens has some financial ideas, Commissioner Zeta has some financial ideas, and Lord knows this particular report has talked about a good 10 to 15 different financial measures. So I'd like to break down on a couple things. I agree with Commissioner McGregor that we're having an outstanding year so far. And I'm going to say that again, outstanding, because revenues are up and expenses are down. And this particular executive director that we have has worked hard to bring more work in-house. She's combined many of the maintenance units, so we're getting a lot more done in-house. And Myung-hee even recognized the fact that a lot of these outside professional services, we've really cut down on that. But the public does want to know where their tax money goes, and that's why I wanted to go back to this pie chart. So yes, indeed, 3/4 of every tax dollar. If you look at bond principal plus interest, that's about 75%, roughly speaking, of each tax dollar. And so, I think it's important for the public to know that this is, you might say, legacy investments by the port, some good and some bad. This particular commission, the three of us, these three individuals, we've approved some purchases in Tumwater of 8 buildings called the Clean Water Center. We're responsible for that. We're responsible for the fuel dock purchase. We're also responsible for the Lacey CDC building. And so, this particular port commission does have responsibilities, but, so every commission or decision we make has to be looked at really hard, because it does affect the overall capital investments, i.e. Which most of the time results in bonds. But I'd also like to compliment the executive director, because she's trying to actually create a capital investment fund. And I think Myung-hee talked about $1 million in that fund now. And so we can self-fund perhaps future projects. In the last slide, Myung-hee, can you go to the last slide that talks about Port of Olympia statement of net position?
Next, please.
Yeah, that one. And so because this government, it's got a funny name, but anybody that spent any time looking at finances know one of your basic documents is a balance sheet. So this is a balance sheet really of the port activities, and assets must equal liabilities plus, you might say, in the business world, we call it retained equity. And here we call it total net assets. And so the total net assets is everything the port is worth after all the liabilities are paid. And Myung-hee correctly pointed out that that went up 4.6% in 1 year. That means that that's good management at the port, because the balance sheet says, this is what this port is worth. And if we were increasing liabilities at a faster rate than accumulating assets, then that number would be going down, but we're not. So I think that's a good number. So I just like to take this opportunity to just point out a couple of things, what I see in this presentation. I want to thank you, Myung-hee, and the finance team for all your diligent work in putting together a pretty comprehensive Q2 statement.
I'd like to respond to Commissioner Downing.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Zito.
I agree that we should not be increasing our liabilities. And you're completely right on that, Commissioner Downing. We want to decrease our liabilities. So 2 things we should keep in mind. One is we have a great big balloon payment coming due in 5 years. Now, neither McGregor nor I will be around in 5 years, but we are partly responsible for that big balloon payment, because some of it is from the Lacey CBC purchase. So we need to be planning on how are we going to deal with that. The other thing is we should be wary of incurring additional big debts, and we should do our due diligence on financial analysis and market analysis before we get in too deep on anything. For example, the Panettone project. The development agreement or interlocal agreement says we're going to pay for the Kimmy Road realignment, for the trail, for the 10 or 20 acres that's going to the city of Olympia. And we don't know how much that costs. We need good financial analyses and good market analyses before we get in too deep, so that we don't increase our liabilities, because we cannot afford it.
Thank you, commissioners, for your comments. And again, thank you, Myung-hee, for this presentation. At this time, we're going to move on to advisory calendar item 2, entitled New Market Development Agreement, Interlocal Agreement Consideration of Approval Process. And our own Felicia Brown is presenting.
Commissioner Downey, I'd just like to point out that Jerry Sevier has had her hand up. She'd just like to make a brief comment about the last topic, if you're willing.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jerry. I did not see your hand. Jerry, you have the floor.
I just wanted to assure the commissioners and the public that nothing has been deleted from our website for previous presentations, and quarterly reports remain the same up there. I think what Mr. Langens was referring to is that we took that out of our presentation to you tonight in comparing and showing after depreciation. And so, but all of the financials are included in full on our website and have that information in there in the details. So there's nothing that's been deleted. So just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Let's move on then to advisory calendar item 2. And Felicia, you'll be presenting the new market development agreement, interlocal agreement considerations and approval. Felicia, welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. Before I begin, I believe Executive Director Sam Gibney has a few opening remarks regarding the status of this draft interlocal agreement.
Certainly, thank you, Ms. Brown. So the commission, as you're aware, had the advisory last Thursday on the overall basic terms of the agreement. And so what Ms. Brown is going to be presenting is then how this agreement moves forward. And, since this isn't, it is an interlocal agreement that has a development agreement within it. And so we have been working with City of Tumwater staff on this, and there is concurrence at the staff level on the basic terms of this agreement. We are working with them to continue to refine the actual language in the agreement. And so we will continue that, and we will be bringing that back at a future date, as the action was tabled tonight. And so Felicia is going to go over what the process is, but the basic terms of the agreement that have been worked out between staff to staff to be presented to the respective legislative bodies will remain essentially unchanged. And I'll turn it to you.
All right, thank you. Tracy, can you take us to the next slide, please? So what I wanted to do was go over the considerations that I thought were important for the commission to understand, as well as talk about the process in reviewing this type of agreement for the port. I think that the port understands that it is different. There is a whole RCW title that is dedicated to port districts and their authority. And there's other aspects of the RCW that apply here. So I wanted to start off by talking about what you'll find in the draft agreement under the recitals, which really sets forth the purpose of the agreement and the background. So we're going to go over a few slides here that are each titled background and recitals. And the first one talks about the authority under the RCW for 2 or more public entities to contract with each other for joint or cooperative action. And that's your RCW chapter 39, section 34. And that is what makes this an interlocal or interagency agreement. And when you see ILA, that is us calling this an interlocal agreement. And in this case, we have the port and the city of Tumwater who are going to have this contract together. Also, in RCW chapter 36, section 70B, local governments, in this case, the city of Tumwater, are authorized to execute a development agreement with the local government and the entity having ownership of real property. In that case, the port is the property owner. And that is what we're doing here. We have an interlocal agreement that incorporates a development agreement, which is something that the city is authorized to execute. And you'll see here on this slide that a development agreement is used to provide certainty and predictability for the parties as the development of the agreement of the property progresses. And that's really important to know that this is all codified, if you will, in RCW Chapter 3670B. And this is the case even though everything that we're proposing here is within the existing land use regulation guidelines within the city of Tumwater. Tracy, can you take us to the next slide, please? So on this slide, I really wanted to point out some of the background that allows the port to be in the position it is to authorize this interlocal agreement and development agreement. RCW Chapter 53, Section 8 authorizes the port to improve and develop the New Market Industrial Campus that we are talking about. And it also authorizes the port to lease its real property in the city of Tumwater. Furthermore, throughout this agreement, you will see that the port is obligated to ensure compliance with all Federal Aviation Administration compliance manuals, as well as our FAA grant assurances. One thing that I think is going to continue to be something that as port staff will have to make sure that we continue to educate everybody here in the county about is the different agreements that are going to apply to this property. And what you'll see on the first 2 pages of this agreement is a callback or a reference back to the option agreement that the port entered on July 13, 2020. And at that time, the port entered into the option agreement with this developer for this property in order to allow for future development with a mix of commercial business and light industrial uses consistent with the city of Tumwater's existing land use and development policies. What I want to point out here is that this is critical background to the development agreement that we're entering because these things will work together. And going forward, terms that are used in agreements that are going to be similar for the same properties are going to coincide to the extent that's practical. And so oftentimes people may be confused because they think there's another agreement when in fact it's an agreement for the same property and it may have similar players, but they serve different purposes. Next slide, please, Tracy. One thing that I think is extremely important to understand about this development agreement is the parties. And a key consideration when you're trying to understand this development agreement or interlocal agreement is that the parties here are only the city of Tumwater and the Port of Olympia. And so throughout the agreement, you'll see the city, meaning Tumwater, or you'll see property owner, meaning the port. All agreements, all acts are going to be either on the part of the city or the part of the property owner, which is the port. The port is requiring and incorporating the express consent of the developer as a term and a condition of this agreement. And you'll find that in Exhibit G to the development agreement, and it's called Developer's Consent to the Agreement. I think we heard on the presentation on Thursday, questions and things that had to do with, well, who's paying, who's responsible. This agreement has to do with the city and the port. And so while it's possible that there are costs and other things that will kind of be carried on or the port will put forward to the developer to be responsible for, ultimately as the property owner, the legal requirement is going to be with the port. That doesn't mean that we cannot transfer or have somebody else that has to cover that cost or also be responsible, but we are going to manage that responsibility. Next slide, please, Tracy. So what I want to do now is just really high level show you the key terms that Alan has gone over on the July 12th meeting and on the August 19th meeting and where they are in this development agreement. So in section 5, you will see the term of agreement. And this is where it actually says that this agreement will go into effect once the resolution adopting the agreement is signed, and that is for a duration of 20 years. This is the language that captures that term. Next slide, please, Tracy. Section 6 has two subsections. The first one, 6-1, vested rights. This is language that when Sam talked earlier about we have agreement on the terms, about we may continue in the next few weeks or as we go forward with the City of Tumwater, we may work together and edit and change this language. This is an example of that, as are any of the terms within this agreement. But I'm pointing out this one because I believe that this may be one that changes to some extent. Essentially in section 6-1, the development rights are vested for the duration of the agreement under the existing land use regulations. And you'll see some details in there that, like I said, are subject to change. It does not change the fact that 6-1 will cover vested rights, and the framework is as you see it. Under 6-2, we're going to have the limitations on this use spelled out. What you see here is that while existing land use regulations allow the development of warehouse distribution centers in excess of 200,000 square feet, the port agrees not to develop warehouse distribution centers in excess of 200,000 square feet on the property in the area east of Center Street. Next slide, please, Tracy. Here in section 7-1 is the language where the port has addressed truck traffic and the relocation of Kinney Street, essentially to direct truck traffic to Tumwater Boulevard and restrict trucks and large commercial vehicles from using the street south of New Market Industrial Campus. Kinney Street will be relocated. As the property owner, it is the port that will bear the cost, and we will be adhering to Tumwater standards. And the relocation will be within port property. This is the language as it stands now. I've had some feedback since Thursday regarding how that cost how this document can maybe capture that cost will actually be transferred on. While that's not something that we currently have in the language, it is something that could potentially be captured there. Even if it's not captured there, it does not mean that cost is not indeed being transferred. Next slide, please, Tracy. Here in section 7-2, sorry, multi-use trail and buffer, we have the language that has to do with the construction and development of the subject property in which we will be providing an 8-foot multi-use trail designed and constructed with a 1-foot gravel shoulder on each side. And you'll see the location described in this paragraph as well. Under section 7-2, it actually sets forth that a proposed design will be completed and submitted to the city for the trail for review and approval in conjunction with the first phase of development. Construction will occur in phases as the immediately adjacent property is developed, and it will be available for use no later than July 12th, 2031. Next slide, please, Tracy. On this slide, I rephrase some of the key language from section 7-3 regarding the community center. And so what we have here in subsection 7-3.1 is basically that no later than either 2 years after the execution of a lease for 50 acres or 5 years after final approval of the Habitat Conservation Plan, which is what the port and the City of Tumwater are actually permittees. I have a hard time saying that word. So they're working together and both applying for the permit regarding the Habitat Conservation Plan via a different interlocal agreement since 2016. After the final approval of the HCP, the port will provide the city with 5 acres of land. The land shall be, which means it must be used for the city's future development of a city-owned and operated facility, such as a community center or pool. What you'll see in section 7-3-2 is similar language that basically means that no later than either 2 years after execution of a lease for 100 acres or 10 years after final approval of the HCP, the port will provide the city with 5 acres of land for this city-owned and operated facility. Taken together, those two provisions will lead to 10 acres of land. Additionally, regarding this community center, you'll see in 7-3, some of the logistics are spelled out. And here we have basically that the community center property will be provided in as is, where is condition. Going forward, you'll see information about what costs are going to, that we anticipate, because we know that from development, but also that the city shall bear the sole cost of development of the community center property for its intended use. What I don't have on this slide, just because we were getting pretty long with the section 7 slides, is that New Market Industrial Campus is subject to FAA compliance, and the port will aid and support in obtaining any FFA opinion on the intended use. And also the port will participate in its pro rata share of any development. Essentially, if it is something that a property owner would typically and should be responsible for, as a property owner, we would have to cover that, and that is what we are agreeing to do. If it's beyond that, however, we are saying that that is what the city would do as the entity that is going to want the use that they select that is in adherence with the community center / pool. And then the last thing that's part of that section 7 community center subsection is that the city will recognize the port and the developer for their contribution. And so you'll see language within this subsection 7-3 regarding that. And it says that the recognition will be akin to how any other donor would be recognized. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here we have tree protection. And what this is basically saying is that the port as property owner will comply with the tree retention requirements of the Tumwater Municipal Code, specifically Chapter 16, Section 8. The port also agrees to concentrate required tree tracts north and east of Bush Middle School. Next slide, please, Tracy. On this slide, we talk about the Mazama pocket gopher mitigation. Again, the habitat conservation plan is discussed on this slide. And you'll see some details that I put forth regarding the interlocal agreement from 2016. And we go into the details of the Endangered Species Act and the regulations by which we're doing the HCP. When you cut through all of that, the port is responsible for mitigation costs under the final HCP pursuant to the terms and conditions of the option agreement, which is the document that I referenced earlier that the port entered in the commission authorized back in July of 2020. Really and truly, those are the key terms that were presented to this commission. I believe the date was July 12th and again on August 19th. The other items in this development agreement are much more standard, non-substantive contract terms, such as language regarding assignment, covenants, and what happens if you have a dispute, what applicable laws and venues. Those are things that absolutely, when we go back and forth and continue our conversations with the city of Tumwater, if they have anything to offer, add, and edit, that we would take those comments and go back and forth with them. But they are what are typically considered non-substantial contract terms. I wanted to highlight the things that have consistently been brought forth to the commission as key terms and really showcase through this PowerPoint what it looks like in the draft agreement as of today. Next slide, please. So these next steps, based off what the commission decided to do with the agenda earlier in this meeting, have already changed. The way that the port handles interlocal agreements is that the port, instead of handling ILAs through resolution, actually has been allowing the executive director to execute them through the commission making a motion and adopting that motion. And that is how the ILA portion for this agreement will be handled. That being said, that is not what we're doing tonight. And I was preparing this advisory for that action. So that first step on this slide is not applicable at the moment. However, this draft agreement is something that I think based off tonight's conversation that we'll be talking about with City of Tumwater. City of Tumwater needs to review this. They are obligated per the RCWs to have a public hearing. And after their public hearing is when they can take their action regarding the development agreement. Port staff will continue to work with City of Tumwater staff to support their review. What that means is if they have specific questions, we will answer those. If those questions come from planning, we will answer those. If they come from the legal counsel, when I say we will answer those, I mean I will answer those. We already worked together regarding the community workshop and the public hearing. If there's support needed there in any way, we'll continue to work and support that as well. Then we will figure out the best means of getting approval of the final agreement from this commission and then executing this final agreement. What I did not put on here, but I referenced earlier, is that this agreement will actually be effective through a resolution. And so that is kind of how this all comes together as we have this ILA that actually incorporates the development agreement. I'm not going to go over the next slide because it has to do with action that we will not be taking tonight. But at this time, I would like to invite you all to ask me questions. Commissioner Downing, you're still muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Felicia, for that presentation. Commissioners, as we did before, I'd like to go around the room and see if there's any questions. And then after that, I'd like to go around the room and ask for your comment. So does Commissioner McGregor or Zita, do you have any questions of Felicia?
I don't have any questions of Felicia. I've been following this very closely, so I'll turn it over to Commissioner Zita.
Well, thank you for this overview, Felicia. I want to thank you also for confirming that the port as property owner is responsible for paying for the Kimmy Street changes, the trail, the habitat conservation mitigation, and other items that Mr. Rowe said last week we would not be paying for. So your confirmation is consistent with the actual agreement that we have before us in writing. I have a question. Let's see, you said that, let's see, everything is within existing land use guidelines in Tumwater. And so my question is, are deep UIC wells, underground injection, I'm forgetting the last word, deep UIC wells authorized in this area by Tumwater's land use guidelines? These are the wells that our experts in public comment have shared with us tonight are likely to be the stormwater system.
Mm-hmm.
So is this stormwater system within Tumwater's land use guidelines? Do you know?
So Commissioner, the first thing that you thanked me for had to do with the confirmation as property owner, we're responsible for our cost of our property. And you're correct, that is what the development agreement says. Last week, Alan confirmed that those costs would actually be incorporated in what we were going to be doing with the developer. And Alan is on the call tonight. So if we could, after we get through this, I would like Alan to speak on that as well. But to your question, I actually was taking note of how many times I heard about the wells you just mentioned during public comment. And I have no line of sight or knowledge whatsoever as to where those concerns came from to even speak on whether or not they are part of a regulation. I was really shocked to hear about them, and I don't know where the concerns really initiated from. And so I would not in a position to speak to that.
Right, we all need to learn more about that since it appears that this will be the stormwater plan for this area. We all need to learn more about it. And
Commissioner, I actually am not even in a position to say that that is the stormwater plan for the area.
Actually, we have confidential information from expert sources that is the case. And it looks like Executive Director Gibbity wants to say I'm wrong about something.
Commissioner Zita, are you done with your comments, Commissioner Zita? I am in charge of the meeting, so are you done with your comments before I recognize another person? Okay. Executive Director Gibbony, did you have a comment?
Yes, I would like to reaffirm Ms. Brown's comment that while this development agreement is between the two parties of the city of Tumwater and the Port of Olympia, it is an inaccurate statement to say that the port will bear the cost of the infrastructure. We will be working with our a developer to do those. So any of the development costs, be it the trail or the street relocations, any other type of improvements there, that will be borne by the cost of the developer. Because this agreement is not between the developer and the city of Tumwater, we are responsible to make sure that that happens. But it is not an accurate statement to say that the port will pay for that, the cost of that. So I just wanted to really make clear that the commission understands that part.
The only thing we have before us in writing, Executive Director, is that the port will be responsible for those costs. So if there is something in writing that says that the port will not be responsible for those costs, that it will be the developer, it would be very useful for the public and the commission to see that document. Thank you.
Mr. Rowe, would you like to address that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's going to be something that's going to be defined in any sort of project proposal, as far as who covers the costs on any road realignment or any other infrastructure needs out there, which will be on the developer to do. And then lastly, on these wells, there has been no stormwater proposal. There's been no project proposal. So any comments about injection wells is just simply false.
Well, thank you.
Rowe,
Thank you. Commissioner Zeta, can we just go around the room, please? I'd like to call on Commissioner
Mr. Rowe has just said I made a false statement and I must follow up on that. So Mr. Rowe, we have multiple lines of information saying that these will be deep UIC wells. So do you know of another stormwater treatment option or stormwater management option that would have 0 acres of storm ponds on site? Can you enlighten us? Because we've heard nothing about the stormwater plans.
So there again has been no project proposed here, along with no stormwater design for said project. So your multiple sources are incorrect.
However, there are 0 storm ponds and most of the land is developed. So I don't know what they're going to do with the stormwater. I bet you know.
Yes, that will be designed into the project plans.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeta. Thank you, Alan. Commissioner McGregor, do you have any comment on question or comment on Felicia's presentation?
No, I want to thank Felicia for the presentation. I think that we have to keep in mind that we're going to be under Tumwater's zoning. And as far as I know, everything that's being proposed at this point meets the zoning requirements for Tumwater. What doesn't meet the code, the zoning regulations for Tumwater, is the fact that they're going to be getting acreage, 5 acres within a certain amount of time, and an additional 5 acres for a community center. There's also the trail that will be going in along the back part of the property as it develops. So, but I'm very comfortable with the fact that we're going to be meeting what is existing, and you can't get any better than that. Nobody's asked for any waivers of any zoning or gone in for any exclusions or whatever. And if Commissioner Zeta has experts that know that this is what's going to happen with these injection wells, perhaps you should pass that along to port staff so they can follow up, would be my suggestion. But part of it is that we want to make sure that Tumwater knows that utilities and infrastructure improvements there are not going to be their responsibility. And that's what this spells out. And the responsibility of the developer will be included as the staff who are experts on these things will work through that and provide that those contingencies are covered. So I'm fine with it. I think that they've done a good job to this point. There were a few things that I asked about based on comments I'd heard the other day, and I've relayed those along to them. And I'm sure that they will try to incorporate language to adjust that accordingly. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McGregor and Commissioner Zeta. So my comment is just that, Felicia, thank you for this laying out from a legal standpoint what's included in here. And I think I understand the Kimmy Street thing. Makes me a tiny bit uncomfortable because it specifically says the owner of the property will be responsible for that. But I realize that there'll be subsequent agreements with the developer to pitch in and help with that project. And the only thing that's occurred to me, especially from public comment tonight, is that, you know, it'd be really great to have some inclusion of solar power on top of, or on this site to mitigate some of the negative effects that citizens have pointed out. And, you know, I'd be interested in seeing some effort in that direction. I'll do a little more research on this on my own, and I may bring it up again in this process. So at this time, we are turning to public comment on advisory items. And we have two advisory items tonight that we discussed so far: the Q2 financial report and the new market development agreement interlocal agreement considerations and approval process. So does anybody like to give a public comment on either of these two items? And I see Charlotte Persons has her hand up. I don't know. Yeah, Charlotte, would you like to go ahead and give us public comment?
Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Give me a second because I just lost what I was going to read with all that just happened on my screen, not yours. Okay. I have 4 concerns for the ILA for the New Market Industrial Campus. And one is the investing of the port for 20 years with no ability for the city of Tumwater to enforce new regulations or codes. This vesting period should be for no more than 10 years. Also, second, in section 8 of the ILA, please reference the Thurston County Climate Mitigation Plan and the City of Tumwater Urban Forestry Management Plan. These are both already adopted, and they have many goals and activities to enhance tree canopy, and the city should have a guarantee that they can carry out those actions. Section 8 also includes a plan to cut more than half the current forested area in the NIMIC. Now, I'm a little confused on this because it turns out that what was Appendix F is actually just kind of a sketch, apparently. It's not a real plan. So that when we see that there's no room for stormwater ponds, or we think that every single tree is cut except for a tiny area and some little strips of trees, this may not actually happen. So I don't know what to say about that, except that it's important that we recognize that mature contiguous trees provide much more heat reduction and wildlife habitat than any other kind of tree development like single rows. So please try to have as much retained mature trees north of in that area as you can. And finally, I'd like to say that you don't mention that the Salmon Creek Basin in general is prone to flooding. And in the EIS, I urge you to take this into account and in the permitting sections, and also consider the cumulative effects from planned and current development in the Salmon Creek Basin that contribute to flooding and overflow of polluted stormwater. Thank you.
Commissioner, you're muted.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Dr. Helen Wheatley, would you like to give public comment at this time?
Yes, Thank you. I'd like to talk about both things. I just wanted to let you know that I found something by the League of Women Voters of interest. They were looking at ports in the 80s, and they were very concerned about port reliance on tax receipts. And at that time, the Port of Olympia was the very worst. It relied for 54% of its revenues on tax receipts. So this is a very long-standing problem for the port. I suppose you could say there's some improvement. As far as I can tell, I couldn't really follow the numbers, but from the original budget for this year, it looked to me like the port was relying on taxes for 34% of this reliance on tax receipts that the League of Women Voters is talking about. So I guess it's improvement to go from 54 to 34%, but it is a legitimate concern. It concerned the League of Women Voters years ago. And it's important, and it's very important to understand which units rely the most on tax receipts. I don't see how you can do your job if you don't know that. Okay, on the next thing, I'm sorry, I still don't understand how you can sign something that says the port is responsible and then say the port's not going to be responsible. And it seems to me that the best way to solve this problem is for the city of Tumwater to make the development agreement with Panattoni. That would solve the problem there. There wouldn't be confusion then. So why not do that? There is no way to go back to Panattoni later. It signed a consent that the port would pay what, so you're asking, as far as I can tell, you're just asking for people to trust the word of Panattoni. And I don't know, I wouldn't buy a car that way or a house or something like that. So I guess I'm a little confused about that and why people dismiss that as not really being a concern, because it's going to be there in black and white. And then I also, I think I echo Charlotte. You keep talking about existing land use regulations. One of the concerns about this is you're asking Tumwater to give up its ability to change those regulations. That's the whole point. That's the ask, as far as I can tell, that the port's making. And Mr. Rose said last time that the main reason for that is to be sure that it can market the property. I mean, that's what he said, as far as I could tell from my listening. So this is a concern. Talking about, okay, because it's a regulations. That's not, of course you have to regulation to regulation at the table. Thank
you, Dr. Wheatley, for those comments. Is there anybody else that'd like to give public comment on our advisory calendar tonight? Anybody else like to give public comment?
We have two hands, Sue Danver. Oh, the other one went away, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sue, I thought we already called on you, but I guess not. Sue, would you like to give public comment?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
As you know, Tumwater, you've mentioned it tonight, has built a is in the process building a 1.2 million square foot warehouse at 93rd and I-5. I'm aware of studies done by hydrogeologists on that area. That is Black Hills Audubon Society's hydrogeo. And eventually the city of Tumwater accepted their consultant's opinion, but Black Hills Audubon Society differed from them. We thought the information, we could not check their analysis because we had insufficient information. And so I would like to present that material to you before you take action on this. I haven't reviewed it in a while, so I cannot speak to it scientifically, but it is done by a hydrogeologist. But what we found insufficient because we couldn't look at the actual parameters of the data if I recall this correctly, I'm not a hydrogeologist, but we could not verify their conclusions that their treatment of stormwater will be safe. I will repeat that. We could not verify if the Water City's conclusions of the safety of their stormwater handling. We could not verify that. So we will give you that material. Now from that, I'm not sure, but the stormwater treatment is to filter the stormwater and to inject it into the aquifer. I think that might be Tumwater's acceptable way. But the question is, you need to look into it. And what is the cumulative impact if you take this 1.2 million square foot warehouse in Tumwater with, that's not including the impervious parking site, and you add the 2 million that Pat and Tony want with the included impervious surface, how much can the aquifer handle? There is, I think, in scientific realm, there's a question of the ability to filter this water. And that is the question. And it sounds like they ran into that problem in Vancouver. So I just want to, we will be sending you something and you can look at it. It is a very comparable analysis because they are both on Salmon Creek Basin, which we are concerned with the flooding of the downstream as well as into the aquifer.
Well, thank you, Ms. Danver, for your public comment. Does anybody else would like to give public comment on advisory items tonight? Well, seeing nobody else wanting to give public comment, I'd like to turn to commission response to public comment. Commissioner McGregor or Zita, would you like to start off, or do you have anything?
I don't have any public comment. Thank you for everyone that has provided information tonight. Some of this will need to be checked out by staff, so but I appreciate you bringing it to our attention.
Thank you, Commissioner McGregor. How about you, Commissioner Zita?
So Ms. Danver, thank you for sharing Black Hills Audubon Society's hydrogeology report that was done for another giant warehouse development in the same high groundwater hazard area that we are currently discussing. The system you described sounds like a deep UIC well, and that would be consistent with the plans we have seen, which have no surface storm ponds. If that's the case, then not only the cumulative effects are a concern, but a single episode could be a concern. One spill in the city of Vancouver contaminated their drinking water aquifer. And the Bush well field is right in the middle of this proposed development. So thank you for sharing that. Ms. Wakely, you're right. We do need to know how much we're relying on taxes for each business unit, and I trust we will have that information in future quarters. Ms. Persons, you're right. It's a big gift to the developer if we can get Tumwater to agree to vesting for 20 years. Tumwater staff expressed concern with that provision at the August 5th community workshop. And they are responsible for protecting the wellhead, for the traffic management. And I don't think it's wise for us to say we're going to be exempt from any future improvements in city codes for 20 years. That is very risky. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. I have one brief response to public comment, and that is, Dr. Wheatley, I hope you can, send us an email showing where in that EIS report from DES, it even mentioned the port is interested in Panamax or Neo-Panamax. I absolutely have never heard of such a thing. So it would be grave error for the DES to quote such a statement, because I know that this commission and in the last 5 years, those words have never crossed our lips. So anyway, next we move on to commission reports and discussion. Commissioner McGregor or Zeta?
In view of the late hour, I'll pass.
I only have one thing to report on. I attended a study meeting this past week, last Friday, and in there, TRPC gave a report. They're doing a transportation survey that they've got out there, and they did a report on that they've sent they've published numerous information, did mass mailings, trying to get people to provide answers to the survey questions so that they can then take that and assimilate it and move forward with another transportation priority plan. And I promised Katrina Van Every, who made the report, that I would provide a contact information so that people can go online in either English or Spanish, and also look at the project page, because out of the thousands that they've sent out, 3,400 is a pretty low return rate. And in fact, she mentioned that in South County, they have probably only had about 120 responses out of South County regarding it. So I would encourage everyone, I've asked staff if they could put it on our social media and get it out there to try to generate some interest in this. I think it's the future of transportation is what they're looking for, and they need a somewhat larger response than 3,400 individuals so that they can properly plan out for the next number of years. So anyway, that's the only report I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McGregor. In view of the lateness of the hour, I will pass on Commissioner report discussion. Is there any other business from commissioners?
I request that port staff announce to everyone on the port mailing list when the public hearing will be at Tumwater. Can
Thanks,
I get a
Commissioner.
yes on that?
Thanks, Commissioner Zeta. I don't think that was a motion. I think that City of Tumwater has an adequate system for informing the public of their upcoming meetings, and I'm hesitant to interfere with their processes. So, but I'm sure the support staff heard you, and then they'll take it under advisement.
I move that the commission direct. I move that the commission direct port staff to share Tumwater's announcement of the public hearing on the Panattoni agreement with port contacts to amplify
it's
that
been moved
message.
to.
Do I have a second?
Great. So it's been moved to send out an email blast regarding the upcoming Tumwater public hearing on the Panattoni interlocal agreement. Is there a second?
I'll second that for purposes of letting Executive Director Sam Givney provide comment as she had her hand raised. So,
Sam, I recognize you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. There is no public, no schedule for the public hearing at this point. So we don't have a way to advertise that. And I'd also just like to note that that was not on the agenda for this evening, and that typically the commission does not entertain motions of this kind during the other business portion of the agenda.
For clarification,
Thank you, Sam.
For clarification,
Right, Commissioner
my
Zeta.
suggestion was that the port share that notice when it becomes available. But if this commission doesn't
Our executive
choose to
director's
engage-
comments in that to conduct an orderly meeting. We stick to the subjects at hand. Appreciate your motion, Commissioner Zeta, and your second for purposes of discussion, Commissioner McGregor. But I concur that, you know, it's outside the realm of tonight's business, and I also feel that, you know, it's up to the city of Tumwater to run their business and without the help from the Port of Olympia. So with
We
that,
have a motion and a
we have
second. I call the
motion.
question.
Very good. So we have a motion to send out an email blast regarding the Tumwater public hearing on the interlocal agreement. When that meeting is scheduled. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
I'm sorry, my fellow commissioners.
Thank you,
Choose
sir.
not to
We can-
inform the public.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeta. The motion has been handled. As we said, we had discussion. We're done with that issue. Is there any other business before we move to meeting announcements? Commissioner McGregor.
No, thank you. Just to comment on that, once we know when the public hearing is going to be, we can take that up under advisement. So at this point, we don't know when that will happen. And when it does, we can get it on a work session or whatever to take it under advisement and further discussion.
Okay, moving to meeting announcements. May I see a slide with the upcoming meetings, please? Well, folks, we have a meeting on September 7th, a special commission work session. And it's called a special commission work session because it falls on a Tuesday instead of a Monday. So the topics for that work session will be spelled out in advance, and we cannot add to those because it's a special commission work session. Then on September 13th, we've got a regularly scheduled commission meeting. Then on September 20th, we have a regularly scheduled commission work session. So with that, thank you, everybody, for your participation tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. So second, is there a second?
Second.
A second. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.